Hey everybody, Tyler with Meeple Mountain here, bringing you another board game review. This time from our friends at iv.studios, who've been kind enough to give us an advanced copy of their new title coming to Kickstarter soon, Fractured Sky. Fractured Sky sets you and up to 4 other opponents in the role of a skyfaring captain, if you will, a leader of an armada of units and markets and fortifications working to have a wish granted to you. The plot of Fractured Sky is that a great star has fallen into the sea and broken apart these islands, and fragments of it have fallen to all of these various locations. A great sea deity who, is not Cthulhu, but is definitely a large sea octopus, has said that if you bring him the fragments of this star, that he will grant your wish, whoever brings him the most. So you and these other captains have set out to reclaim these fragments of star and bring them to the great sea deity so that your wish may be granted. Mechanically, what that breaks down to is you will be using secret information to put down troop strengths on these various islands as you take actions throughout each turn, each round of the game, and you'll be then revealing those simultaneously to see who has the most strength in these various regions, to control the region, to claim the starfall and any resources that you'll need to continue to keep your engine moving as you build markets and fortifications and additional ships to bolster your forces and their strength. There's a lot to unpack in this tiny little box, and I'm really excited to show you what iv.studios has brought to the game, to the table today with this game of deduction and a little bit of bluffing and diplomacy that you can work into this. It's really fun, and there's a lot to do here. So without further ado, let's get to the table and learn how to play Fractured Sky. Welcome to the world of Fractured Sky. This is again an area control game where you will be fighting over control of Starfall, a valuable resource of a fractured star that fell to these various islands around the board here. You need to collect the most by the end of 5 rounds of play. The player with the most Starfall at the end of the 5th round will have their wish granted by the sea god and will be victorious. Players will be ultimately moving their units around these various island locations, attempting to exert power. Power is going to be secret information that you will be placing down with these large starships or little seafaring ships of yours that you'll be then flipping over to reveal your troop power. You'll be adding to that power by adding skimmers that add 1 power, or fortifications to these floating platforms that add a power to any of the adjacent islands that that particular floating platform touches. We'll get into the specifics of that in a moment, but this will be secret information, and at the end of the round, once 3 of your ships have been placed, everyone will reveal their ships, will tally up the strength, and the winners will gain either starfall if there is any, or resources on the various island location. Speaking of resources, there are 3 main resources in the game. There's wood, stone, and gold. That's what you will use to build your units and peek at objective cards and do a lot of the things that you'll need to do to keep your engine moving smoothly. It's worth noting that each player will have a nice little aid here that walks them through how battle works, their actions on a particular turn, costs of various units, and exactly what they'll do on their turn. And a turn in this game is very simple. You will do basically one of 3 actions. You'll place an airship or a built skimmer on one of the islands. You'll build a fortification or a market, and we'll talk about that in detail in a minute, or you'll look at the Starfall deck, the objective cards, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. But your turns are very clean, and after you've placed your 3rd ship, large ship, these hidden guys, your turn is over, your round is over. Once everyone has finished their round, we will kind of reveal these ships, tally up everything, divvy out rewards, wash, rinse, repeat. The game in itself is very clean and simple, but there's a lot of depth of strategy about where the hidden information goes and how that plays, and we'll get into that in just a minute as well. Moving over here, you'll see that you have your player area. You have a secret little screen here where you'll be able to kind of tabulate your strategy, keep your resources secret and hidden from your opponents, and do all kinds of shenanigans. In your player area, you're going to have these little tokens here that you'll use to denote when you've seen or peeked at various objectives throughout the board. You will have your star ships. These have a very wide range of values on them, ranging from 0s all the way up to a 10. So there's a lot of difference in strength here. The thing to note is when you place these out, again, you're always placing 3 per turn total. Your value on these can never exceed a total of 10 across all the chips. So if I did something like a 0, 9, and an 8, that would be incorrect. That would be too many points, and I would be penalized for that. So you'll want to plan. You could have 2 0s and a 10 out there. You could have, a 1 and then a 6 or whatever you want to do. As long as you totally reach the 10 value between all your chips, you're good. So those are your main chips. You then have skimmers. They're a very limited resource. I believe you have 5 of them. But they add 1 strength to the area that they go go to. You have markets, which will help you gain resources from adjacent islands, so it's a good way to get your engine going. And fortifications, which also add strength out there to the map. The last area we have here is kind of the starfall and objective area or section of the board. I'm going to move this just for a second so you guys can see that a little better. We have here the public starfall deck. So basically every turn, we're going to know one starfall is going out to one location. Pretty clean and simple. We see it's all the way over there in the Molten Moor. As the rounds progress, we're going to keep putting out more and more of these secret objectives, which is where Starfall is going to go, but we don't know where that's at unless we take a peek at those particular options. And every round, these will refresh. So the first round, there's only one. The next round, this will go away. Then there'd be two, and so on and so forth. So these will always be changing, but it's an action you may want to do to know where the Starfall is going to go so that you can plan and try to get ahead of your opponents. It can be very handy. When you peek at these, like for instance, if we peeked at this one, it's the Careening Cliffs. You can choose to note that you've seen it and take one of the resources that are from that island. But by doing so, say I took a stone, we can now look at the islands and say, oh, this one clearly, even if I don't know what this is, it's going to an area with stone. That limits out the islands it could be. So there is information you're giving away by getting that resource. So you may want to just peek at it and not give away any information. So cool little choices to make there. The top are secret objective cards, and we can look at some of these in detail in a minute as well. But basically, they're going to be objectives every round. One will flip over and be scored automatically, giving Starfall to the person who meets that particular requirement. They're very clean, very simple, and self-explanatory. But again, you'll denote if you've peeked at that particular objective as we go throughout the game. Again, play will continue like this for 5 rounds of play. Whoever has the most Starfall at the end of that round wins the game. In the case of a tie, the person who is in the highest turn order will win the game. Very quick and clean, but again, the beauty and depth of this game comes from the choices that you have to make about where you're going to send your troops and how you're going to try and outwit and misdirect your opponents. So with all that said, let's take a little bit of a closer look at the main board and talk about some of the choices that you might have to make in a game of Fractured Sky. All right, here we have a little bit of a closer look at the main board of Fractured Sky. Now, it's worth noting this board has a really nice gloss feature on a lot of the little components and pieces of the board, but it may cause some glare, so we've done our best to work with that, but do bear with me as that looks really great in person, but may cause a little bit of glare as you look at this from the screen. Now again, as we mentioned, the name of the game here is putting your main ships out onto these various island locations so that you can claim the rewards. Now, of course, at the start of the game, none of these things would be out here. So let's use the Molten Moor or Molten Moor as an example. We know that there's a piece of Starfall here. On a player's turn, they have a few choices as we laid out here on this nice little player aid. You can place a ship out onto the map. You can try to build a fortress or a market onto any of these open little hexes. And these little hexes are called air platforms, and they're connected to a different amount of other floating islands based on the stars under them. So for instance, this one is connected to 3, the purple, the Molten Moor, and the Sinister Spires. The 4 here is connected to all of those, plus the Dreadful Desert. And so some locations may just intrinsically be better than others, but you may get blocked out. And so the earlier you build, the better choices that you'll have. And when you do, you'll pay the resources associated. So 3 stone for a fortress, for instance, or 2 wood and a gold for a market. And once that's placed somewhere, that will offer you aid and support to all of the areas around it, with fortresses adding additional combat strength and markets giving you an additional resource to those adjacent islands if you have an airship there when you collect resources. You'll collect resources once we do battle resolution, which we'll talk about in just a second. But again, you'll be working to place these ships out onto various locations. Now, the first time you place an island, if you're the very first ship to go there, you'll see that you're covering up this little card as well. This is going to allow you to get a look at one of the objective cards that we showed you earlier, which will give you an edge in kind of figuring out what's going on as far as objectives, where Starfall, hidden Starfall may be going. And so getting to different locations is encouraged, as the first person to go there will get some form of a benefit. Multiple ships can go to any location. They'll just begin to set on the island itself. Once everyone has placed their third and final ship, their turn ends immediately as we go through, each player taking 1 turn at a time. Once that's done, we'll reveal all of the ships and we'll tabulate the total strength at each location. So in this case, we see that yellow has 5 and green actually has 3 because they have a fortress that adds 1 strength plus the 2 that they have here. You'll tally up your results with the highest player getting the Starfall, which of course is victory points, the most important thing in the game. Second place will get both of the printed resources on that particular particular island. So in this case, green would get 2 stone. If, for instance, say blue had come here with a skimmer, which adds 1 power, they would normally get 1 of the resources there. If they'd come with one of their main ships, however, say this, they would get an additional resource because they have a marketplace there as well. And so there's lots of strategy as you go, and you'll go through each of the islands doing this kind of battle resolution step, claiming resources or starfall if any is present, keeping in mind that you'll be buffing yourself with fortifications and markets. This is how conflict resolution works and kind of what you're looking to do on the map at large. The last thing to mention is the player turn area over on the left-hand side of the board. And you'll notice that there's kind of a randomly set out here, 1 through 5 in this instance. When a player ends their turn, say red wanted to end their turn first, they can actually slot down into any of the positions that they want to go into, which is handy. So I could say I want to go next. I want to go first, and they'll slot down and slide into that position. And so this will continue to shift as players end their turn, moving into other positions. If you take the 4th or 5th position, you will get a bonus gold as well, which is a nice little benefit for going later in the turn. You'll be able to use your resources again, as I said, to build things, but also you'll be able to use them to scout and peek at objectives. If you ever need to scout and look for starfall, you have to pay 2 gold. So gold is actually a very valuable resource in the game, as that's going to help give you hidden information about where additional starfalls will go so that your turns are more efficient and better prepared than your opponents. Now, we've had a look at these before on the main screen, but I wanted to make sure everyone had a chance to get a good close-up look at some of the secret objectives as well as the hidden starfall cards that you will encounter throughout a game of Fractured Sky. Now, note that these obviously would not be revealed like this. They would all be face down and hidden. This is an example of what you might see on Phase 2 of the game, where there would be 2 hidden starfall cards and then these objectives. Now, the first one would be flipped, it would be scored, and the rest of these would be face down, like so. But I wanted to give you a chance to see some of the options that would be out there. Now, at the end of every round, what we'll do is we'll flip and score this objective right away. So we'll see kind of what that is. This would already be scored and done. This would be the one on round 2 that we would be scoring. And then we would flip these starfall cards over and add that starfall to the map, giving us more starfall to fight over, which of course will increase as we go throughout the rounds of the game. Now, as I mentioned before, one of the actions you can take on your turn is to peek at either where these hidden starfalls are going and potentially claim a bonus resource if you would like. But again, remember that gives information out to your opponents as to which type of islands that's going to. So risk reward there. Or you can take a peek at one of the hidden objectives. You could peek on round 1 at the objective in round 5, just so you know what you're working towards. You can do this in any way that you want, but when you peek at it, you'll take a look at it and keep it secret and know kind of what's getting scored on the end of that particular round. And so it kind of lays out some of these potential starfall rewards and needs that you'll see, as well as player counts if you need to be mindful of that as well. Some of these will not work at lower player counts. For instance, Formidable Frontline here says have the most troop power in the Wayward Wood. That's a location on the main map. Very simple. If you knew that was a thing, you would just want to set out to have the highest troop volume there because you're getting a free starfall if you have that. If you were the only person that knew about this and no one else was prepared or aware of that particular objective, you might stumble into this victory point just by having one ship there, one little skimmer, or a fortification. Who knows? Like, there's all kinds of neat little ways that you can kind of maneuver and work on these items. So this is just an example of some of the things you might see out there throughout a game. Now you'll notice here we actually see that we have another example, which is to have the most buildings connected to the Wayward Wood. So in this case, we would know that the Wayward Wood is going to be a highly contested area of this particular game. These objectives will shift. There's a large deck of them, so these will always be very vastly different and adds a lot of replayability and asymmetry to kind of how each game of Fractured Sky will play out, as these will certainly shape the things that you'll want to be fighting over as you go throughout the game. An interesting thing to note is these little stars on the actual objective symbol shows what type of card from the deck can actually go to each of those locations. And you'll notice on the back of these cards, they have little dots. 4 dots, 1 dot, certain amounts of dots that correlate to where they can actually go or potentially not go on this line. Some of the objectives have to be later, for instance, this building one, because of course you wouldn't have a lot of buildings on turn 1, but by turn 5, there will be buildings everywhere, so it'll be much more contestable. So that helps keep things balanced and fair, so there's not like a crazy hard objective that's impossible to do on turn 1. So that's just important to note as well as you think about setup and play throughout the game. that, in a nutshell, is everything you need to know to jump in and enjoy a game of Fractured Sky. Players will continue these turns of doing actions until they finally place their third main ship, ending their turn until everyone's done that, revealing those ships, claiming battle rewards and starfall if they can, flipping objectives, and kind of resetting, reshuffling through 5 rounds of play. After the 5th round, whoever has the most starfall is victorious. The game itself plays very quick and clean and is quite easy to teach and enjoy. The depth of this game really comes from how you try to fake out your opponents with those zero-cost ships, those zero-troop ships, trying to maybe dump a lot of strength in a different area for misdirection. One of the things that I really like to do was take a peek at either a hidden objective or a secret starfall and then instantly dropping a ship somewhere that may be correlated. So sometimes I'd do like a hidden starfall with gold, and I'd look at a gold island, not the island with the starfall, and drop a ship automatically and put a fortification there and put a skimmer there. And so everyone would be like, oh yeah, clearly that's a starfall spot. And a lot of times people would put their resources here in a misdirection to try and stop me from getting a free starfall, and I'd sneak a little guy over somewhere else where the starfall actually is and get that starfall very easily, while people wasted a lot of resources where I had a zero ship there, misdirecting them. And so there's a lot of fun that can come from having information that other people don't have. There's a lot of fun negotiation that comes from when someone else gets that information, and maybe you keep it hush-hush together and don't share it, or maybe someone threatens to share it to kind of take away the advantage that you have. There's a lot of fun here. If you have the right group at the table, really, really cool game, because there can be a lot of fun table negotiation and interactions that happen. IV.studios really likes table interaction. It's something I appreciate about their company as a whole. All of their games, Moonrakers, Veiled Fate, they just always push you to have these really cool table interactions. Mythic Mischief is their game too, but those games especially really encourage these really fun table interactions, and I think that's just such a cool element that I encountered in this title as well. The art of this game is really interesting. It's very like Spyro Skylanders-y. It's very different than I was anticipating. I don't hate it. It's just not what I was expecting. It's a very cool art style that kind of brings this game to life. It has a lot of color. I hope you were seeing that through the video. There's a lot of color and pop to this title. It's very, very bright and vibrant, and I really like that. I love that this is, in my opinion, just a secret Cthulhu game, right? Like we have the sea god giving us granted wishes for bringing him Starfall. Very, very Lovecraftian snuck in there, and I think that's awesome. Obviously, this is not a Cthulhu game. I just think Space Octopus is a really fun thing. So love that that is the kind of theme and vibe of this game. Rulebook is really well done. It is large. There is a solo variant. There's rules specifically for lower player counts. All of that's in here with lots of illustrations, guides, and options, pictures. Everything's in here. You will not have questions if you take the time to read the rulebook. IV does a good job with rulebooks consistently, and that is the case here as well. Really enjoy the production value. I will say this, again, is a retail copy. This is not the Kickstarter Deluxe version that will be available as well. It is notable that this game gets very flat in the retail version. Everything is just tokens and chits. That's fine. It doesn't detract from the good gameplay. It just doesn't have the table pop and kind of the cool visual elements that I know the Deluxe will have, with your player tray having really cool resource trackers and your ships having these magnetic tokens that hold onto an actual plastic model that you can set down. There will just be a cooler, elevated option available if you're into that kind of thing, which I am a sucker for. But the game plays just the same, and it's really good. Again, you'll see this is a pretty small board. It's not big. The table presence isn't massive as far as like being a table hog, but there's a lot of fun here. There's a lot of depth and replayability from the objectives, the starfall being changed every game, and just how you play and interact. So there's a lot of really fun options to unpack here in this title. So if you're looking for a game that is kind of that hidden information, secret strength kind of deduction style game for area control hybrids, I would encourage you to check this out. Coming to Kickstarter here very soon in April. You're going to really like what IV Studios has brought to the table today. It is exciting, it is unique, and it is really, really fun. So I had a blast with this title. I always have fun with IV's games, and I know that you will too. So I hope this review was informative. I hope it helped you understand kind of how this game will play, how it works, what you can expect when you open up a box of Fractured Sky, so that you can jump in and have a really great time with this awesome title. I hope you'll continue to come to Meeple Mountain for all of your board game related contents and needs. We love putting out content for you guys. If you like what we're doing, hit the bell, subscribe, share. It helps encourage us and keep us putting out awesome content. So as always, guys, thank you so much for coming, and happy gaming.
Thanks for checking out this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Check out these links to find some other games you might want to bring to the table. This is Tyler Williams, signing off.